Good day, everybody. Welcome to the SPRG chat room. We hope to use this platform to exchange ideas on hot and trending topics. My name is Edwin Yeo. I'm the General Manager of SPRG Singapore. And today I have with me my colleague. I'll let him introduce himself.
I'm Shamir Osman, an Assistant Director with SPRG Singapore. So one of the key issues here in 2020 was that obviously COVID has changed the world as we know it right now. What was the first thing that popped into your head, Edwin, about our industry, of course, when it looked like the virus outbreak was going to be something actually serious and global?
I think that's actually a very good question. The key thing, obviously, within our industry is that it's made up of many different type of clients and work that we actually do, right? And the clear impact that COVID-19 actually had was towards a lot of marketing, work that we actually do as agencies, not just ourselves, but, probably the whole industry as a whole, that during lockdowns and circuit breakers globally, as well as in Singapore, you can see a lot of the marketing dollars were basically held back, or events were cancelled because events are not allowed anymore. So I think that was the big impact that we actually saw during that period of time, where suddenly agencies as a whole had to actually deal with how do we actually continue communicating to an audience when we can't do the usual things like your events. We couldn't do maybe things like press conferences and stuff like that as well. So there was definitely a huge push towards digitization. We've seen a lot of companies do virtual events, virtual press conferences and things like that. But, in some way, the advertising dollar was significantly reduced. And that was a very big impact on agencies as a whole. The good thing about it, so it's not all bad. There were some good things about it. The good thing about it was there were new opportunities that came out of it as well, which in some way also forced a lot of players within the industry to rethink, what could they do with the talent verticals and talent pool they actually had also. So for ourselves, obviously, we have pivoted from just being a pure media relations agency when we first started out to today, where we are completely integrated, in the way that we actually do our work. But a lot of agencies also went down that route as well, and what you can then see is that instead of basically doing a work for hire kind of work that we've been doing as a servicing kind of business model, there were many opportunities where media companies started asking for companies like ourselves to start creating kind of content during that period of time also. So you started seeing many different companies, media companies, and not only just media companies, but also even Singapore Tourism Board, for example, also, put out all this content that they wanted people to give ideas in terms of producing short videos and things like that as well, to tell stories, especially inspiring stories during COVID-19 period. So I think that was one very interesting trend that actually did happen. Nothing that unusual in terms of agencies jumping onto this, because obviously a lot of agencies already have creative talent, sitting in-house. And when your marketing job tends to dry up, you then basically say, what can I use my creative talent for? So I think that was one of the interesting things that came out of the entire pandemic, issue.
But that wasn't exactly enforced now, was it? I mean, some of the agencies were already doing this here in Singapore at least, and pivoting towards content and content creation as well. Now, did you think there was a fear that the old business model, media relations, that was going to die because of what happened in the pandemic?
I don't think the pandemic is the cause of the media relations business as a whole, being reduced. Generally, obviously, with social media over the last 10 years or so, communication has changed drastically. And you definitely see the fact that a lot of information that the population is getting today comes through social media news feeds as well. This is not something that is unique to agencies. If you look at media companies as well, obviously a lot of the promoting of their stories went through social media also at the same time. So if you talk about a pivot, it probably wasn't a pandemic reason as to why there was actually that particular pivot. But in the agency space specifically though, while many agencies had invested into content marketing as a service that they provide to clients, many of them didn't actually start producing their own intellectual properties or their own content. And there probably wasn't, it wasn't something that agencies thought about, because it was left to basically, production companies that produce TV shows for Nat Geo or Netflix and guys like that. But during this period, where there was probably a lot less work available, you do start thinking, well, can we use the talent that we actually have who are already they are already experts in creating, right? So can we use talents like that to tell stories that are not necessarily to serve a client per se? It could be something where they own as an agency and then, is shown in different media platforms. And as a result, they have an intellectual property that they actually call their own. So it is a new type of business for agencies. It is probably not so new for production houses because they've been doing it as both as a service and also creating their own content for a while. But it's certainly something that agencies didn't really look at before. So I think it was interesting that COVID-19 brought this out because there was obviously a lot of challenges during that period of time, right? So if you talk about being a production house, during lockdown, you can't go out and film, for example, right? Then how do you start creating content without being able to go out and film? Mm-hmm. So as an agency, we're used to that. We're used to that kind of pivot, right? Because when things happen, we would say, okay, how do we use technology to overcome certain kind of problems, right? And agencies are pretty good at basically using disruptive technology to come up with campaign ideas. Now, instead of doing it for campaign ideas, we started doing it for, okay, how do we tell a good story, uplifting story and things like that as well.
Well, the storytelling now is a little bit different though then compared to the old days of everything going to print and the newspapers. The earlier pivot started at social media when that became huge. And has it changed now in this part? Now you're telling a story over Zoom video, selfie video.
Yeah.
Is that what it is now?
The platform dissemination primarily still is majority on Facebook. Obviously, media platforms or websites that came out during this period of time is trying very hard to win subscribers, right? It's not easy. Obviously, consumers have a lot of choices today, right? So you're not just talking about the main media companies. You have a lot of smaller companies that come out and started their own platforms as well. As an agency, we also have our own platform. We have a football platform called Football Xiao. And that's something where, we own it. We also did TV shows that, is being shown on Singtel Media and things like that as well. So suddenly the choices for the consumer is a lot today, right? And the people creating are also probably at an all-time high. Again, did not start with the pandemic. With the advent of YouTube, content creation just from user-generated content or what they call user-generated content, today have become proper businesses, right? You see a lot of YouTubers that started off as a one-man video maker sort of thing. Today, they have 20, 30 people working in the company basically producing YouTube videos as a revenue stream.
Nas Daily, for example.
Right. Nas Daily is a very good example. Nas Daily started out a few years ago, got tens of millions of followers, came to Singapore, set up an office, and recently moved up to Dubai to do something like that as well, right? So you do see that there is that huge revenue stream there that probably was untapped by agencies before. Now, is it easy for agencies to pivot into that? It's difficult. It's difficult because you still traditionally as an agency think about it from what kind of fees do a client pay us that commiserate with the kind of work that we actually put out there. This pivot then is, we don't know how much we're going to get paid doing this work, right? But we hope that the content actually succeeds and then suddenly a lot of money flows through as a result of it. So it's not an easy switch. But I think necessity of the times became, look, we need to do something, otherwise we have to start letting people go, right? And I think that actually, if you look through the Singapore industry, a lot of advertising agencies started doing this. Recently, there was news of another agency basically producing a documentary, in a National Geographic style kind of thing as well. So, it's very clear that when the pandemic is over, the agencies may have a hybrid model of basically doing the service, which is their bread and butter, but also investing some efforts into basically saying, can we own certain content, that came out of us as well.
Isn't this all of us in this very weird hybrid space in the sense that advertising agencies are going to do that? Now, there are some media owners like newspapers and all that are also moving into like a brand studio where they can tell client stories, some of it on their own platforms, and then us as well from the communication side of things. Now, we not only tell our client stories, we create stories of our own, and then we try to own it. Yeah. Isn't this sort of a mishmash hybrid space where everyone kind of comes in together?
Yeah, but to be fair, that mishmash didn't really start with COVID-19 as well. The mishmash probably started when there was a defragmentation of media consumption. and obviously everybody started earning a little bit less money than they used to. So people needed to start thinking about what else can they actually do, right? So it is not unusual to see media companies going to do the agency route in terms of getting clients to and do campaigns for them. It is not unusual to see agencies basically saying, okay, let's create some unique things that we can create. In the space for us, for example, it will be short form videos, which a lot of bigger media players probably don't do because their effort is spent on 1 hour episodes like on Netflix and things like that as well. So it's diverse. It is a very good time for a consumer though, right? Because as a consumer, you have so many choices today, right? And it's not just choices that you pay a $15 a month subscription for. It's also choices that are free and available for people to basically consume as well. So I do think that while there is a mixing of different type of companies, it probably is a competition of who tells the better story at the end of the day.
That is the key now, isn't it? Eventually, we're all storytellers of some sort, various platforms, various mediums, but who tells the most convincing one that tugs at the heartstrings and all that?
Definitely.
How does that all tie in with now with what we see as falling budgets over this last year?
Yeah. Well, the hope, of course, fingers crossed, is that the budgets will go back up, right? But sometimes the reality of the situation is that once clients are used to a slightly lower kind of budget, they will say, oh, if the agency can do it for that kind of budget, they'll keep doing it in that way. But your hope is, of course, the recognition that the quality work comes with the kind of budgets that can be put behind it, right? So, we can probably do a video for a certain type of small budget, and that will have a certain type of quality associated with the kind of budget. But if you want to do let's say a Game of Thrones, for example, you can't be doing it for a $20,000 budget, for example. So I think the recognition at the end of the day of how well you tell the story, through a video format or through a interactive format, for example, is primarily also tagged to the kind of budgets that we put behind the production also. Now, this is where I think the tricky part with agencies come along, right? Generally, the bigger budgets are reserved for campaigns that brands actually do. So that will be runs into hundreds of thousands of dollars, and probably you can then create higher production value kind of content as a result of it. But at the same time, when you're talking about social media, where the lifespan of any content consumed is probably, if you're lucky, 2 weeks, right? And you start thinking, how much money am I going to put into a content that only lasts 2 weeks at the end of the day, right? And as you and I both know, because we do so much social media work, you're challenged to come up with fresh content almost on a weekly basis, right? So there's also that reality that you have to say the consumer's attention span today and loyalty in terms of following you today is a lot shorter than it used to be. So your budget will have to adjust accordingly to that also at the same time.
And also convincing the clients that this is the best way to tell the story that you got.
That's right.
That's a constant challenge. It doesn't change at all.
That's right. You've seen a lot of work that not just ourselves, but a lot of other of our peers have been doing. During this time, has been a lot of rebranding going on, for example, right? And what's come with all this rebranding is actually what is the story behind the rebranding, right? So a lot of people are investing into what does a brand actually stand for? What message and what story do we actually want to tell? Do we talk about just our products, or do we also talk about the research? Do we talk about the good that we're doing for the world and things like that as well, right? So more and more, in the old days where it was just buy our products, today it is, here's the philosophy behind our products. Here's the things that we're actually doing to help you, to help the people and things like that as well, which honestly to a PR professional is nothing that new. But to a lot of the marketing folks, it's actually a completely new world they're actually playing in as well. So, the content space is actually pretty good right now, even despite pandemic. In fact, I think COVID-19 has brought out better storytelling as a result of it as well.
It's brought out a lot more TikTokers, I'll tell you that. and podcasters as well, right? Everyone's stuck at home.
Yep.
You know what? I'm just going to order a mic, sit around and tell my own story and then see who else wants to listen.
Yep.
Therein lies, for me, one of the big challenges, though. There is so much content.
Yep.
So much content.
Yep.
And how do you make this particular thing that you create stand out from the entire crowd?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to what I said a little bit earlier. It's a competition of who tells the better story today. And how do you tell the story also matters. Do you write it as an article? Do you make it into a video? Do you do an interactive website where people can have an interactive experience? Do you do a kind of video that people can choose their own paths as to how to do that, right? So there are many different ways you can tell the same story. I think in today's world, if you talk about getting attention, you probably have to be the best of the best. You probably have to tell stories that tug at people's emotions, connect with people, they relate to it, and things like that as well, right? And I think in the space of actually doing that, generally people are constantly seeking out content, right? Let's talk about entertainment as a whole, right? You can be subscribed to a platform like Netflix or Disney Plus or HBO Max, for example. But your habit would be, I will scroll through all the different content there and see which one catches my attention based on perhaps the description of that particular show, right? And then from there, I maybe watch a trailer, and then after watching a trailer, I might say, okay, let's watch one episode or let's watch a few minutes of it and see how it goes, right? So probably the way that you would then try to get attention is surrounding that piece of content that you're actually doing. How do you promote it on Facebook? How do you promote it on YouTube? How do you promote it on different social media platforms as well? So you can't, and that's where us as marketers, as communicators, also we have an advantage because that's actually our bread and butter, right? Promoting products, promoting shows, that's always been in our DNA. So creating the original show and then marketing it, that's in our DNA today, and I think perhaps in a way, agencies do have some advantage of actually doing that.
Now, what do you see as a way forward for our industry in this post-COVID space? Do you foresee any more big changes as countries start to open up, as the vaccine becomes available and things start to return to some sort of normalcy? Do you foresee any more pivots that lie ahead?
Yeah, I think the big thing that you can actually tell from COVID-19 and the push towards digitalization is actually a return to globalization, right? And it's ironic to say because actually COVID-19 has stopped globalization in a lot of ways, right? Because people can't travel anymore and things like that, right? But in actual fact, because of digitalization, what you create in Singapore, for example, doesn't necessarily have to be a Singapore audience.
It can't anymore now.
It can't anymore, right? And in fact, you can create things for a global audience. In the old days, if you wanted to make a film, to get the film from Singapore to the US, you probably go through multi-layers of distributors, for example, right? Today, you put it on YouTube, someone from US can see it, right? And then you just do your marketing efforts around the territory that you want your consumers to actually come in. So I do think that in that sense, the world becomes smaller as a result of COVID-19, even though it's pushed us apart in terms of our ability to physically travel. But, if I want to even talk about not just content creation part, but even servicing clients, today, technically speaking, whether my client sits in Singapore or sits in the UK, it really doesn't matter, right? Because we can actually do the work out of Singapore for the UK when it comes to consultancy, for example, So I do think that a lot more opportunities can arise out of it, right? How we leverage on those opportunities as an industry as a whole, that will be interesting because obviously every country will be trying to fight to become the lead in that particular area as well, right? But, we'll see some of that. The more rigid structures within the agency would be, if my HQ is in the US, then they should be leading and all that kind of thing. Will that break down a little bit? I think time will tell. Time will tell. Also, because the decentralization of multinational corporations and the rise of the Asian multinational corporations as well might switch that dynamics around a little bit as well. We are basically already servicing clients that are outside of Singapore, and we use technology to basically to be able to do that. But it's still very Asian-centric at this point in time. Could that possibly go beyond Asia? Who knows? I think that's a possibility.
The technology thing was very interesting for me on a personal level, though, because it's existed before. We've had Skype, right? And now all of a sudden, because of us being stuck at home, Zoom becomes a big thing, and essentially communicating through video and webcams has become such a big thing that everyone is used to it now.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, if my mom of that generation can get on Zoom to celebrate a festival with her siblings, and everyone's just waving at the camera the entire time, but still talking while they're waving. Yeah. If that generation can get used to this, now this will change the way people function as a whole.
Yeah. Data has shown that since COVID-19, the adoption of technology and digital communication tools have gone up 7-fold, roughly around there, right? And if you see just in Singapore alone, there have been government initiatives that have been going out there and teaching the elderlies how to actually use
Exactly.
technology as well, right? You see recently they've been doing all these ads and videos about the elderly who's been using Zoom to basically talk to their families and things like that, and using WhatsApp and stuff like that as well, right? So you do see that while the technology has always been there, the adoption of that technology is actually a lot more today, right? Now, then the next question is, we do Zoom calls all the time. Now, how does Zoom calls then get even better than what it is today, right? Today, Zoom calls are primarily talking heads that you actually see, right? And in fact, some people turn off the video because they say they didn't have their makeup on or something
That's
like
a
that,
little
right?
rude though in my book. That
Yeah. But you start seeing hologram technology that's coming up that creates virtual stages during these conference calls, for example, right? So the experience that you see online could somewhat replicate, for example, if you're presenting a very big proposal to a client, right? Instead of just sharing screen and you only see the PowerPoint, there's technology today that you can embed yourself as a presenter of the entire PowerPoint, for example.
within
right?
the visual
Within the
itself.
visual itself, So when you start looking at the advancement of technology in a few short months, you can imagine that in the next few years, the leap is going to be even more amazing, right? So when you start thinking along those lines, the way that we do business will invariably have to adopt, these new technologies that are probably going to come up as well.
I tell you what though, there were a couple of pitches that we had to do over Zoom, and in the initial bits, it's a little bit off-putting. It throws you askew a little bit because you're so used to coming into a room, reading a room,
Yeah.
watching the faces as you present something, to
Yeah.
know where to stop
Yeah.
and whether to expect a question. And it took a while to get used to talking heads in front of a screen.
Yeah.
And it will take a lot more getting used to if I'm talking to a hologram as well.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just one of those things that you will probably have to accept that it's a new normal. I hate to use that word because it's been overused to death, but in a way it is true, right? Because you have big companies that have announced that work from home is all the way until September 2021, for example, right? You have companies that actually have reduced their office size or rethought about what their office can be used for and things like that as well. So I don't think this is going to go away. Even post-pandemic, there may be a efficiency in actually doing something like this as well, that, companies will start thinking, maybe this is the new way we should actually be doing things also, right? When you're used to basically doing webinars and you see the effect the webinars actually had and the interaction that people actually have on the webinars, you start thinking, do I then need to start rent a big ballroom and start doing that event? Or can I do it virtually and I can get 3 times more participants, right? At the loss of perhaps that personal interaction that you're
that
talking
one's a
about,
big loss though.
right? But then the flip side of it is you get a much larger audience, for example. So I think as much as we think we're all experts in doing this already, the truth is that we're probably still taking baby steps right now and figuring out, how do I read someone on a video call without actually physically being in the same room, and how do you even read a person if the video is turned off, for example?
I'll tell you what, see, that's our next business idea right there.
Yeah.
Right? A guide as to how to read faces on Zoom calls.
But the industry has pivoted, and I think that is something that we can't deny. The pivot to content, the pivot to technology, the pivot in terms of how you do business, how you sell your business, and things like that. I think that's changed a lot, and it's very difficult for any company moving forward not to try to be on the tip of the technological changes that are coming along. Even a website will change. We've already known that people are using mobile phones to serve more often than using desktop, right? What's the next leap in technology? What's the next thing that can improve that efficiency of getting your information about yourself across to potentially a new client, for example, right? What are the things that you put on the website that goes beyond that just traditional corporate thinking of who we are, what we've done, and things like that as well? The experience that people get when they come onto your website, all those things will evolve, and companies will start playing catch up to all these things as well. And let me tell you, I've been leading SPRG for 14 years now. In that 14 years, the generational leap of technology has been amazing. And you're talking about any technology lasting maybe 1 to 2 years before something new comes and displaces it, right? So it's so much harder for professionals to keep up. If you think that, for example, your skill is media relations, you start questioning after a while, what's my value as a consultant if the only skill I really have is media relations, right? Now, the good thing is majority of people are actually able to, say, advance themselves and improve what they're actually doing as well, right? Of course, there's always a bunch of people who don't, but the truth is majority of the people in our industry were actually very used to catching up and pivoting, towards new technology, new ways of communicating. That's what the value of agencies are, because a lot of times you spend a lot of time looking at new things that are coming up. We don't just look at what other agencies are doing. When we started going into storytelling, for example, using SPRG as a case, we look at New York Times and how New York Times told their stories as well. So I think there is this whole learning curve that everybody's actually going through, and we will get better at it because agencies are resilient that way. We are able to get better at these things.
All right, let's look back to look ahead, right? You were here when social media, Facebook at that time, started to become a bigger and bigger and bigger machine. What do you remember from that experience where everyone needed to get on Facebook, because companies were getting on there as well? So what do you remember from that experience, and how did the agency pivot back then, and what lessons can we draw that for now?
So the lesson that I think we can actually learn from that, and I wouldn't want to say we are the only ones that actually did it, right? I think a lot of different agencies started looking at it as well. Facebook in 2008, there's no reality to the kind of Facebook marketing that you can do today, right? Because they didn't even set up their own advertising revenue streams at that point in time yet, right? So what you did was you experimented a lot with the social media platform, and you can see how do you reach a large group of people with as minimal effort as possible, right? Let's put it that way. So in those days, you created friends accounts, for example, right? Or you created group pages, for example, right? Today, there are actual page for brands. In those days, there wasn't such a thing. You can create group, then you hope to add everybody to that particular group. A lot of it's experimentation, and the experimentation actually never stops, because just as you're getting used to Facebook, suddenly Instagram pops up, right? Just as you're getting used to Instagram, suddenly Messenger like WhatsApp becomes a very big thing in terms of dark social. And just as you're getting used to that, TikTok now becomes the new thing, right? And a lot of older people don't understand what is it about TikTok that really makes it work, right? But if you talk to the generations of consumers and people out there, you will start realizing that social media has become, in some way, a divider of age groups as well.
Oh, quite clearly,
right?
Actually.
So you speak to younger people in our office in their 20-something, they will tell you, we don't really use Facebook. Facebook is used by our parents, right? You start talking to even younger than that. They say they don't really use Instagram as much. They use TikTok, or they use Telegram, to communicate a lot more. And this is only in the space of 12 years. In 12 years, how many new things have come? How many things have gone? And it's so difficult to catch up all the time. Snapchat, at one point in time, Snapchat was on the verge of becoming the next biggest thing, like Facebook, for example. So the way that we have to adapt constantly, because of how fast things are today, is can we catch up? And then can we change as that technology, is either adopted or not adopted at the end of the day, right? So I do think that there is some challenge there. I do think that, the learning that we actually have when we first started going onto social media is never stop experimenting. Every new platform that comes in, monitor, look at the adoption rate, look at the usage, look at what features keep being updated every month. Think of new content you can create using those new features that they actually create. I mean, Facebook today is amazing, the number of things you can actually do on it, right? You can actually create entire games on Facebook, like we have done, right? Just using tools that Facebook provide for you as well. So there is a reality that maybe if you think about beyond that, right? In those days, none of us were tech savvy at all, right? But we experimented. But today, maybe when you start hiring young people that come in, maybe they have to come in as already being able to do basic coding, for example. So I think that the even looking at HR would slightly change because of the way that the industry has changed.
If I may, the key lesson from then is always keep experimenting and exploring and adapt fast.
Yeah. I don't think, again, it's unique to our industry. You talk about people who, in pharmaceutical, for example, right? Part of their business is R&D, and they keep doing R&D, right? You talk about people who create mobile phones. A lot of it is always coming out the next model, the next innovation, and things like that as well. Why should we be any different? So the truth is, you do need to have the mindset as an agency to keep experimenting, keep trying new things, and maybe actually create new things. It doesn't even have to be leveraging on Facebook and guys like that anymore. Who's to say that the next Facebook wouldn't be created by an agency, for example?
Oh, that's very optimistic. But I tell you what, though, what it feels like from here is that we all need to adopt a startup mentality when it comes to embracing platforms and whatever else new that COVID and the new world has thrown at us, right? I mean, Zoom calls and meetings and presentations, there, for
Absolutely,
example.
absolutely. And I think that startup mentality is actually key for the growth of any organization today. Where gone are the days where you have one person sitting there and a team of 200 people supporting you doing all those things, right? The startup mentality becomes every new thing that we try. As founders, as creators, as inventors, we are the first one that actually try it first, right? And then we pass on that skill to the next level of people, and everybody starts adopting it at the end of the day, right? So you're right, that startup mentality is very important. We need to get our hands dirty. We need to basically say do the things ourselves. When we say experiment, it's no longer a case of, hey, Shamir, go and experiment on that and tell me what it works. No, I got to experiment on it myself, and I may be an old man, but I experimented it myself, So I think that mentality, you can't go away. So I do feel that the way that we are thinking, the way we operate, and even the business model, there's a lot of innovation that has to come into our industry, and we cannot stay still as an industry.
Sounds like an exciting couple of months ahead when we welcome 2021 and then look ahead into the world coming out of COVID into that brand new world, new normal, right?
Well, but yeah, I do think that even as vaccines roll out, we have to be mindful that there may be a pandemic down the road that we don't know about as well. So the new normal in actual fact is learning how to live in a world that new things are going to explode without us, actually knowing that it's actually going to come, right? So in that sense, it's an exciting 2021, but it actually may be an exciting decade that's actually coming up.
You do have a hope or a dream for the industry in this 1 year ahead. What is the one thing you would like to see for us?
I can't speak globally, but let's speak Singapore as a whole. I think one of the things that Singapore agencies and maybe Singapore's creative industry as a whole need to actually start thinking about is how we can actually be world class. The talent is actually there. Sometimes maybe the belief is not. When we look at shows that are produced on HBO by the US companies and things like that as well, we often think that we can't compete with those guys, right? And we can't tell a story like those guys. In actual fact, Singapore has a talent pool to actually do things like that. Within our organization, we have that kind of talent pool, and you've seen some of them yourselves. Outside our organization, there's so many other people out there that have that kind of talent as well. But sometimes it's that lack of belief of can we? Oh, these guys are Disney. We can't fight with Disney, And I think there needs to be a break away from that kind of mentality. And I think the digital world has allowed us to actually experiment and do things that are a little bit different, but no less appealing and no less, why is it that there are kids who can just unbox a present and make a $23 million business out of doing that on YouTube, right? And that's the thing. That's the thing where, if you ask me what do I hope for the industry, is that we start realizing that there's so many things that we can actually do that is world class, because we do have the talent. We need to come out of the manager mindset of we are good managers, but we're not good founders and inventors, And I do think that's really, really important for the industry as a whole, if we want to show the rest of the world that Singapore is not just a place you come to where you find very good project managers.
I'll tell you what I realized though, and that's just in the last 15 minutes, that we have pulled off a world-class podcast right here in this studio right now.
I hope so. Anyway, thank you for everybody's time listening in. I hope that we shared some ideas and insights of what we think about the industry, particularly here in Singapore, but maybe a little bit around the world as well. Hopefully we can do this again soon, and please do feel free to share your comments and your insights on social media.
I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did.
All right, this is Edwin signing off.
And Shamir Osman.